It has been more than 3 weeks since paramedics administered CPR on a person experiencing cardiac arrest at Senator Mitch McConnell's home, according to dispatcher audio. That very same day, the senator was hospitalized. And since then, since June 14th, Mitch McConnell has not been seen or heard from publicly, and rumors are flying. Staffers for the 84-year-old Kentucky senator have declined most media inquiries and given few updates. Today, Senate Majority Leader John Thune and his deputy John Barrasso said in separate statements they had spoken with McConnell by phone, but they didn't elaborate on his condition or prognosis. McConnell announced last year he would be retiring in January 2027, so this is his last term. He's not running for re-election. But even if he departs his seat early for whatever reason, Kentucky Republicans have put into place a plan to make sure they hold it. So back in 2021, the Republicans in the state legislature passed a law saying that if a senator died or left office, the Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, would have to appoint someone from the senator's own party to replace him. Then in 2024, they took away Beshear's power to replace outgoing senators altogether, mandating a special election instead, though it remains unclear if Beshear would actually follow that law or challenge it.
John, here, this might be the biggest one yet. Mitch McConnell has vanished from public life without explanation. And Trump told reporters he has no idea how the longtime Senate leader is doing. The silence from both McConnell's office and the president is striking, given McConnell's central role in Republican politics for nearly 4 decades. But here's what most people scrolling through their news feeds don't fully grasp yet. This story goes way beyond one awkward quote from the president on Air Force One. This is about something much deeper and much more disturbing. We're watching a sitting United States senator, someone who still holds the power to cast votes that affect your healthcare, your taxes, your children's education, and whether this country goes to war. Essentially go dark for weeks on end with no real explanation.
Barbara Boxer served as 4 terms as a Democratic senator from California, and she joins me now. It's great to have you on. I know you worked in the Senate, obviously, where Mitch McConnell was. I want to just start by your understanding, because I've covered politics for a while. It does seem like it happens fairly often now that a member of Congress, House, Senate, Republican or Democrat, has some medical issue and just kind of disappears for weeks with no explanation. And I understand the imperative for privacy, but it does seem that if you're in one of those offices, there is a little bit of a requirement for some public communication about your condition. Do you think that's fair?
Chris, I think you're way too soft on this issue. This is a public office. You know, you're very sweet. This is a public office. We don't work in the private sector. And you need to just get out there with the truth. And I am stunned at what has been going on. And I don't think that the people should stand for it. If we have to pass some kind of rule of the Senate, if you're gone more than a few days, you better explain yourself.
His office has been feeding the public recycled lines that sound like they were written by a robot. He's improving. He's working closely with staff. He's receiving excellent care. That's it. That's all the American people have been given. The same 3 sentences over and over again, like a scratched record skipping on the same groove. Now, I want you to really think about this. We live in an era where surveillance cameras are everywhere, where reporters camp outside hospital entrances like paparazzi stalking celebrities, where a regular person can't sneeze without someone posting about it on social media. But one of the most powerful men in the entire Western world has managed to disappear from public view for over a month without anyone outside his inner circle having the faintest clue what's actually going on.
I remember when I was running for the Senate while I served in the House, I missed several votes because I was campaigning. I had to be honest. And if people were annoyed with me, I totally got it. But, you know, Patty Murray recently broke her ankle. She's in the Democratic leadership. She's from the state of Washington. And she immediately, as soon as she could, got a picture of herself with a funny message, a T-shirt, and showed her leg. This is what it's about. And so, yeah. I don't understand it. It's awful and it's wrong. There's a public service of being paid by the public. And, you know, if you were in the private sector, you'd have to report to your CEO. if something happened to you. Well,
Right,
the people,
right,
they're the
right.
CEOs of America, so get with it. It's wrong. I don't care who you are.
One of the other reasons I want to speak to you, someone who I have a lot of admiration and respect for, is that you served for 4 terms in California, and then you stopped. You said, I've done enough. And that's a precedent I feel like maybe more people could take up. Mitch McConnell was, I guess, 78 when he ran for re-election. There are senators who run for re-election at 78, and they run at 80, at 82.
And that's not just odd. That's unprecedented. That's the kind of story that should make every single American sit up and pay attention, regardless of which side of the aisle you sit on. The timeline of events reads more like a political thriller than actual news. It all started when emergency responders received a call to a residence in Washington's upscale neighborhoods. When they arrived, they found a man unconscious. That man was Mitch McConnell, not resting, not taking a nap, unconscious. That's a word that carries serious weight. That's not the language of someone who just had a dizzy spell or felt a little under the weather. That's the language of a genuine medical emergency. He was rushed to the hospital that morning, and his office dutifully put out a brief statement confirming he was being treated.
And I think there is a real feeling in America that there's a kind of gerontocracy thing happening here. And you start to run up against these real thorny medical issues and questions of incapacitation that are difficult for everyone.
Yes. And of course, you can get sick when you're young. So I don't like ageism, but I do think there's a point at which you have to say goodbye. Now, I went through such a difficult time when I talked to Senator Feinstein when she was just going downhill, and I was asked to talk with her to really encourage her. What an incredible legacy she had, and it was being destroyed because, people would just see her going downhill. She got really mad at me when I called her, and she said, "This is my work. This is my calling." And, if Mitch McConnell were to call me, which he won't, I would tell him what I told her. A, there's life after the Senate. B, it feels good to get out when you still, you're functional and do something else and help other people. And yeah, I couldn't succeed with Diane. I tried. It didn't work.
They promised updates. They promised transparency. And then just like that, the line went dead. Days stretched into weeks with absolutely nothing substantive emerging from McConnell's camp. Reporters who have covered Washington for decades, who have cultivated sources in every corner of the Capitol, suddenly found themselves hitting brick walls. Every call went straight to voicemail. Every email received the same automated response. The people who usually leak information like a sieve suddenly had nothing to say. And that's when the speculation machine really started cranking into overdrive. Social media exploded with theories ranging from the plausible to the absolutely unhinged. Was he in a coma? Had he suffered a stroke?
There's also here the context of the power play here. I don't think anyone is necessarily. I don't think Kentucky would be a swing state in a Senate election. I think it's largely expected to be safe blue. Yeah. But the Republican state legislature has gone to incredible lengths to make sure that the Democratic and democratically elected statewide governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, who's in his second term and is quite popular, it's not like he's some fluke, right? That he doesn't get to do the thing that other governors before him would have been able to do, which would be to appoint a replacement if McConnell had to leave the term early for some reason.
I call that an abuse of power. I think it's very disrespectful to the people who elected Andy Beshear. And I hope the people there wake up and vote for Democrats and walk away from this party. That's all about power, all about secrecy, all about taking a wrecking ball to everything we've held dear. So, yeah, these things are all converging as we get to the midterms, and we should think about all of them.
Was there some kind of power struggle happening behind closed doors? Nobody knew. And the longer the silence stretched, the wilder the speculation became. Then came the details that really poured gasoline on the fire. McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, a former Secretary of Transportation in her own right, was spotted leaving what appeared to be a rehabilitation facility. But here's the kicker. She was dressed like she was trying to avoid a CIA surveillance team. Surgical mask, dark sunglasses, Long trench coat that could have come straight out of a spy movie. Now look, maybe she just didn't want cameras in her face during what is undoubtedly a stressful time for any family. That's completely understandable on a human level. But when you're already dealing with weeks of total silence from a senator's office, when the public has been given nothing but corporate speak nonsense, seeing his own wife dodging photographers in what amounts to a disguise just makes everything look so much worse. It confirms every suspicion that something isn't being shared with the public. And if that wasn't enough to raise eyebrows, consider this. While McConnell was lying in a hospital bed, his wife reportedly went ahead with a previously scheduled trip to China. Her team insisted the trip had been planned for months and was connected to philanthropic work the family does overseas. They maintained that McConnell's condition didn't require her immediate presence by his side. Maybe that's completely true. Maybe there's no story there at all. But in the world of politics, optics matter. They matter a lot. And the optics here were undeniably rough. You've got one of the most powerful senators in American history, unconscious in a hospital. His office won't tell anybody what's actually wrong with him. And his wife is literally on the other side of the planet. That's not just a bad look. That's a catastrophe of image management. Now let's talk about what happens when the silence becomes so deafening that even your own colleagues start turning against you. This is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, a Republican, was asked directly about McConnell's health. His response was stunning in its candor. He flat out said he doesn't know anything. He knows zero. He's totally in the dark. This is a fellow Republican senator. This is somebody who sits in the same building, attends the same closed-door lunches, participates in the same strategy sessions that are supposed to bind the party together. And he's saying he has no more information than some random person scrolling through Twitter. Let that really land. If the people who work alongside McConnell every single day don't know what's going on, who exactly is in the loop? Because it sure isn't the American public. And it sure isn't the president either, as we've already seen. Hawley went on to make an even more pointed observation. He suggested that at some point, elected officials owe their constituents an explanation, not a complete medical file with every embarrassing detail laid bare, but basic honesty about whether their senator can still do the job they were elected to do. It's a fair point. When you cast a vote for somebody, you're not just voting for a name on a ballot. You're voting for their judgment, their stamina, their ability to show up and fight for your interests. If a senator physically cannot perform the duties of their office anymore, the people who put them there have a right to know. That's not being nosy. That's not being invasive. That's basic accountability. Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama essentially echoed the same sentiment. He told reporters that during their weekly Republican lunch, the room got absolutely zero updates on McConnell's condition. Nothing. Not even a vague assurance that everything was fine. He straight up said, somebody needs to do something. Somebody needs to come out. That's a sitting senator in a closed-door meeting with his own party's leadership, walking away with less information than what you could find in a random tabloid headline. These are the people who are supposed to be McConnell's allies, his fellow travelers in the trenches of Washington politics. And they're being treated like outsiders, like people who can't be trusted with basic facts about a colleague's health. Even Kentucky's Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, felt compelled to weigh in on this. He sent McConnell's office a letter essentially asking for clarity. He pointed out that the people of Kentucky, and really the entire country, have grown increasingly concerned about McConnell's health and his ability to keep serving in office. Now, sure, you could say a Democratic governor pressuring a Republican senator is just politics as usual. There's certainly an element of that at play. But the underlying question he's asking is fundamentally legitimate. If a senator can't physically do the job anymore, shouldn't the people who elected him actually know that? Shouldn't there be some mechanism for transparency, some baseline expectation of honesty? And then there's the fascinating little wrinkle that most online commentators completely missed. A conservative commentator named Scott Jennings, who actually used to work for McConnell, claimed on social media that he personally spoke to the senator on the phone for almost 20 minutes. He said they talked about everything from Iran to Ukraine to a trip that Trump had recently taken. So on one hand, you've got sitting senators like Hawley and Tuberville saying they know absolutely nothing about McConnell's condition. And on the other hand, you've got a former aide turned TV commentator claiming he had a lengthy, substantive conversation with the guy. Those two things don't line up. They don't line up at all. Either McConnell's team is picking and choosing exactly who gets access to him and who gets kept in the dark, or there's something about this timeline that just doesn't add up. When a story has gaps like that, when the official narrative contains contradictions that even casual observers can spot, that's when speculation online starts to spiral completely out of control. People start cooking up wild theories that go way beyond what's actually been confirmed. They fill in the blanks with whatever makes the most sense to them, which is usually whatever aligns with their pre-existing biases. The left sees a cover-up, the right sees a media conspiracy, and the truth, whatever it actually is, gets buried under a mountain of hot takes and baseless accusations. So where does Trump fit into all of this? Well, this is the part that a lot of people are missing, and honestly, it's one of the most compelling aspects of the whole story. Trump and McConnell have had a notoriously rocky relationship for years. This isn't some secret buried in political gossip columns. This is public record. After the 2020 election, particularly in the aftermath of January 6th, McConnell gave a blistering floor speech absolutely torching Trump's conduct. He laid into him in terms that were genuinely harsh, even by Washington standards. And yet, on the impeachment vote that followed, McConnell technically voted not guilty on a procedural technicality. He essentially condemned Trump in the strongest possible language and then refused to follow through with the actual consequences. That kind of behavior, hedging your bets, trying to have it both ways, is the kind of thing that creates permanent, bitter resentment in politics. Trump, in return, has criticized McConnell publicly many times over the years. He's questioned his leadership, his loyalty, his fitness to lead the party. He's called him weak. He's called him ineffective. He's accused him of being more interested in protecting the Washington establishment than in fighting for the voters who actually put Republicans in office. The tension between these two men is not new. It's been simmering for years, occasionally boiling over into public view, but always there, always lurking beneath the surface of every interaction. So when reporters ask Trump about McConnell's health, and Trump just goes, "I have no idea," some people are reading that as a genuine lack of information. He simply doesn't know, and he's being honest about that. But other people, and I'd argue this is the more accurate reading, see something a lot colder in that response. Why would Trump go out of his way to check on a guy who has clashed with him publicly for years? Why would he extend the hand of friendship to someone who has attacked him on the Senate floor? Why would he pretend to care about the well-being of a man who has been a consistent thorn in his side? It's not exactly shocking to people who follow this rivalry. It's almost expected. Trump shrugging off a question about McConnell is just another chapter in a long-running feud that shows no signs of ending anytime soon. And it's not just Trump who's been cold toward McConnell for years. A significant chunk of the MAGA base has spent years calling him Rhino, which stands for Republican in name only. The accusation is essentially that he cares more about DC insiders, about lobbyists, about the smooth functioning of the political machine, than about the voters who actually put Republicans in office. They see him as a creature of the swamp, someone who's been in Washington so long that he's lost touch with the people he's supposed to represent. So when McConnell disappears from public view for over a month, some of his loudest critics online aren't exactly rushing to send him flowers. Some are openly speculating. Some are mocking the secrecy. Some are straight up saying this proves he was never really on their side to begin with. That's the reality of Washington right now. Even a health scare gets filtered through years of political grudges before anybody agrees on how to feel about it. Now, let's get to the heart of why all of this actually matters. Way beyond the personal drama between two political rivals who have been circling each other for years. The Senate right now is running on a razor-thin margin. Every single vote counts, especially on close legislation. If McConnell is out of commission for an extended period, that changes the math on the floor completely. It changes leverage. It changes what Republicans can actually pass without full attendance. It changes the entire dynamics of how the chamber operates. This isn't just gossip. This isn't just tabloid fodder for people who like watching political soap operas. This is actual governing power we're talking about. A senator being sidelined, even temporarily, has real consequences for what does or doesn't become law. It affects whether bills pass or fail. It affects whether judicial nominations get confirmed. It affects whether the government stays open or shuts down. And then, after weeks of wall-to-wall silence, McConnell's office finally put out something a little more concrete. They released a photograph of him and Elaine Chao smiling, holding that day's newspaper. It was a classic proof-of-life move, the kind of thing that hostages release to show they're still breathing. Along with it came a statement claiming the whole thing traces back to a fall, partly connected to complications from having had polio as a child. They insisted he didn't suffer a heart attack, didn't have a stroke, didn't break any bones, but he did develop a mild case of pneumonia that slowed down his recovery. Finally, more than a month after he first went unconscious and got rushed to the hospital, Americans got some actual information about what was going on with their senator. So was this all just an overblown media circus? Was it a classic case of journalists making mountains out of molehills because they had nothing better to report on? Or was there actually a legitimate reason for people to demand more transparency sooner? Honestly, it's kind of both. The media definitely loves a good mystery, and a powerful senator disappearing from public view is exactly the kind of story that gets editors excited. But at the same time, the public had legitimate questions that deserved legitimate answers. When the people who are supposed to represent you go dark for weeks on end, when even their own colleagues don't know what's happening, that creates a vacuum that gets filled with suspicion and mistrust. Let's break down what's really going on here. Because beneath all the drama, beneath all the speculation and the social media hot takes, there are 4 real things happening that actually matter. And they tell you a lot about how Washington really works behind closed doors. First, this is not McConnell's first health scare, and that context matters a ton. Back in 2023, he famously froze up mid-sentence during a press conference. Just stopped talking completely for almost 20 seconds while cameras rolled. It happened more than once. One time, he had to be walked back to his office by aides, then came back out later to try and finish answering questions. So when this new hospitalization hit, people weren't reacting in a vacuum. They already had years of watching this man's health decline in public, on camera, in real time. That's why the silence this time hit so hard. People had already seen warning signs before. They'd watched him freeze up. They'd watched him struggle to get through basic press appearances. And now they were getting zero information during what turned out to be his most serious incident yet. So this wasn't some random overreaction from internet trolls looking for something to be outraged about. This was a reasonable public reaction built on actual history. If you watched those earlier freezing episodes yourself, you probably had questions too. You probably wondered what was really going on with a man who had been such a towering figure in American politics for so long. Second, and this one is honestly the most important piece of this entire puzzle. The secrecy itself is the real story here, way more than whatever medical details eventually emerged. Think about it. For over a month, the office of one of the most powerful senators in the country gave the public almost nothing. Recycled statements, no photos, no video, no press conference, no real answers to basic questions. That's not how you handle a health situation when you actually want to be transparent with the people you represent. That's how you handle a situation when you're managing a narrative, buying time, and controlling exactly what gets released and when. There's a massive difference between privacy and a total blackout. Privacy means sharing relevant information while keeping personal details private. A total blackout means sharing absolutely nothing and hoping nobody notices. What we got here was much closer to a blackout. And that's exactly why senators from his own party Guys like Hawley and Tuberville ended up publicly saying they had zero information. When your own colleagues are that far out of the loop, that's not privacy anymore. That's a communication strategy, plain and simple. It's a decision made by a small circle of aides about what the public deserves to know and when they deserve to know it. Third, the Trump angle. This is where the political tension really comes alive. Trump and McConnell have had a rocky, bitter relationship for years now. This didn't just start yesterday. So when Trump tells reporters he has no idea how McConnell's doing, people aren't shocked because everybody already knew these two weren't exactly exchanging friendly phone calls. But here's the thing that makes it bigger than just personal drama. Trump is the president of the United States. Whether he personally likes McConnell or not, McConnell is still a sitting senator whose health status can directly affect what gets passed, what gets blocked, and how tight the Senate math is on any given vote. So when the president shrugs off a question like that, it's not just petty. It actually raises a real question about whether the highest levels of government are staying informed on issues that affect actual governing. This is why when you really sit with it, the most powerful man in the country is basically saying, "Don't ask me, I'm as clueless as you are." That's not exactly a reassuring message. It suggests that even at the very top, there are massive gaps in communication, massive blind spots where critical information simply isn't flowing. And if the president doesn't know what's going on with a senator from his own party, who exactly is making sure the government continues to function properly? Fourth, and this is the part that ties everything together. This entire situation exposes something way bigger than one senator's health. It shows you how much control powerful people in Washington have over what information the public even gets to see. McConnell's team decided when to release updates. They decided what details to share and what to leave out. They decided when the proof of life photo came out more than a month after he was first hospitalized. None of that timeline was decided by voters, by reporters, or by the public. It was decided entirely behind closed doors by a small circle of aides. And that's the pattern you see over and over again in Washington. Whether we're talking health, finances, or decision-making, the people in power control the timeline of what gets revealed. The rest of us just wait around hoping somebody eventually tells us the truth. So why does all of this actually matter to you? Because it's a preview of a much bigger problem in American politics. We've got aging leaders on both sides of the aisle, serving well into their 80 seconds, holding on to power in institutions that were never really built with strict transparency requirements for situations like this. There's no rule that says a senator has to publicly disclose a health condition in real time. There's no law forcing an office to give weekly medical updates. So when something like this happens, the public is basically left completely dependent on the goodwill of whoever is running that senator's office. And as we just watched, that goodwill can look a whole lot like total silence. Who actually benefits from all this secrecy? Honestly, it's the people already in power. The longer McConnell's team controls the information, the longer they control the political narrative around his condition, his ability to serve, and whether pressure builds for him to step back sooner rather than later. Every single week they stayed quiet was a week where they, not the public, decided how this story got framed. That's not conspiracy talk. That's just how institutional power protects itself when it's under pressure. It's a lesson that applies far beyond this one situation. And think about the ripple effect this has on trust. When regular people watch a story like this unfold, watch a senator's office recycle the same 3 sentences for a month, watch a fellow Republican senator go on camera and say he knows zero, watch the president himself shrug it off. That erodes confidence in the whole system. It doesn't matter which party you support. When the people supposedly serving you can hide basic facts about their own ability to do the job, that plants a seed of doubt that spreads way beyond just this one story. People start wondering what else isn't being shared. What other decisions are being made behind closed doors without anyone outside that circle having a clue? That's the real cost here. Way bigger than one senator's hospital stay. So where does this go from here? McConnell's already said he's not seeking another term. His time in the Senate has an expiration date already on the calendar, ending in January of 2027. But that doesn't mean this story just fades away quietly. Expect more questions about his ability to actually show up and vote in the months ahead. Expect Republicans like Hawley and Tuberville to keep pushing for more transparency, especially if his office goes quiet again. And expect Trump to keep getting asked about it, especially given how tense the relationship between these two men has been for years now. Every time McConnell misses a vote, every time his office skips a scheduled appearance, this story is going to come right back up. Because reporters have already learned that his team doesn't volunteer information easily. They have to be pushed for it every single time. And here's something else worth thinking about. This whole episode is a preview of a much bigger fight that's coming in American politics over the next few years. We've got a bunch of senators and representatives from both parties who are well into their 70 seconds and 80 seconds, still holding on to powerful positions. At some point, the country is going to have to grapple with whether there should be actual rules around this stuff. Real disclosure requirements, real limits, instead of just hoping every office handles it with honesty. Right now, it's basically the honor system. And what we just watched with McConnell shows you exactly how well the honor system works when the stakes are this high. It doesn't work well at all. The real story isn't McConnell's health, it's the secrecy surrounding it and the president's dismissive response. When powerful people decide what you get to know and when, trust erodes, and the rest of us are left wondering what else is being hidden.